At exactly 5:23 a.m. on September 14th, 2023, Miguel Santos drove his cattle trailer through the gates of Sinaloa Cartel's ranch in West Texas. Security cameras showed nothing suspicious, just another rancher delivering his monthly beef shipment. But hidden inside those 40 cattle transport containers were $4.8 million in cash. The final load from his 7-month campaign that had systematically stolen $18 million from the cartel. By noon, he had vanished along with the money, leaving behind only empty trailers and a note carved into a fence post. Even the strongest bull falls when the herd turns against it. This story didn't start with a plan to rob the Sinaloa cartel. It started 2 years earlier when Miguel discovered his family's 800-acre ranch was being used as a front for the cartel's money laundering operation, and his own foreman had been selling his cattle to fund drug smuggling. Miguel Santos was 44 years old, a third-generation cattle rancher who owned Santos Ranch, 800 acres of prime grazing land in West Texas. He supplied beef to restaurants and distributors across Texas and Mexico. Miguel was the perfect invisible rural professional, a trusted supplier with a legitimate cross-border business. His background as a former Army logistics officer made him an expert in supply chain management. He understood how goods moved across borders, how documentation worked, and how to spot vulnerabilities in complex operations. But his world collapsed when he discovered the personal crisis that would change everything. His trusted foreman, Carlos Mendoza, had been systematically stealing his prize cattle for 3 years, selling them to cartel fronts and pocketing $800,000. Worse, Carlos had been using Miguel's trucks and ranch credentials to smuggle drugs across the border. The cartel had been using Santos Ranch as collateral without Miguel's knowledge, creating a web of fake ownership documents that trapped him in their operation. When Miguel confronted Carlos about the missing cattle, his foreman revealed the devastating truth. The cartel would frame Miguel for the entire operation unless he paid $1.2 million in damages for discovering their scheme. Miguel had 90 days to pay or face life in prison for drug trafficking he never committed. The ultimatum included a terrifying threat. They had photographs of Miguel's 16-year-old nephew, Danny, helping with ranch work, making the boy an accessory to federal drug trafficking charges. Santos Ranch sat quiet in the early morning light when Miguel began his monthly cattle inventory on a crisp October morning. The routine had been the same for 20 years. Walk the pastures, count the herds, check for sick animals, and update the breeding records. But something felt wrong as he counted the herd in the north pasture. The numbers didn't match his records from the previous week. 47 head of cattle were missing from his prize Angus breeding stock, animals worth $150,000 each. These weren't just any cattle. They were his best breeding bulls and prize cows, the foundation of his ranch's genetic lines and future profitability. Miguel had spent 15 years building this bloodline, selecting for muscle mass, disease resistance, and superior beef quality. These animals represented the Santos family legacy spanning 3 generations. Miguel felt his stomach drop as he rechecked the count. The missing cattle included Thunder Bay, his prized bull worth $75,000 alone, and 12 of his top breeding cows. Someone had specifically targeted his most valuable animals, demonstrating intimate knowledge of his operation. Miguel immediately checked the security footage from his barn cameras. The digital system recorded everything that happened near the loading areas where cattle were moved for transport. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. on October 8th. There was Carlos, his foreman of 12 years, systematically loading the missing cattle onto unmarked trucks in the darkness. Miguel watched in horror as his most trusted employee directed other men in moving his prize breeding stock with military precision. The footage showed Carlos using Miguel's own cattle handling equipment, opening gates with keys Miguel had given him, and directing the loading operation like he owned the place. The men worked silently and efficiently, clearly following a well-rehearsed plan. Miguel counted 6 trucks leaving his property over a 3-hour period, each loaded with his most valuable cattle. When Miguel confronted Carlos that afternoon near the main barn, his foreman showed no surprise or shame. Carlos had been expecting this conversation. Instead of denying the theft, Carlos dropped a bombshell that changed everything Miguel thought he knew about his own ranch. Those cattle were never yours, hermano. The Sinaloa cartel has been using your ranch as collateral for 3 years. You've been working for us without knowing it. Carlos's words hit Miguel like a physical blow. The man he had trusted with his livelihood, the person who had eaten dinner at his table and helped train his nephew, had been systematically betraying him for years. Carlos pulled out a manila folder containing falsified paperwork that proved the cartel legally owned portions of Santos Ranch through shell companies. Miguel's own signature appeared on documents he never signed, transferring cattle ownership to cartel fronts. The papers looked completely official, complete with notary stamps, county filing numbers, and legal language that would fool any bank or government inspector. The documents showed a complex web of fake corporations with names like Texas Beef Holdings LLC, Lone Star Livestock Partners, and Southwest Cattle Investment Group. Each company appeared to own different portions of Miguel's cattle and held liens against his property. The paperwork created a legal maze that would take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to untangle. Miguel realized his military logistics training gave him unique insight into what he was seeing. This wasn't random crime. It was a sophisticated supply chain operation using legitimate agricultural business as cover. He had been unknowingly facilitating their money laundering through legitimate cattle sales for years. Every monthly delivery he made to Mexican buyers, every truck that crossed the border with his ranch credentials, had been part of their operation. Carlos revealed the cartel's insurance policy against Miguel's discovery. They had photographs of Miguel's 16-year-old nephew Danny helping with ranch work over the past 2 summers. The boy handles the cattle that carry our product. He's an accessory to federal drug trafficking. The photos showed Danny loading cattle, cleaning trailers, and handling equipment that had been used to transport drugs. Under federal conspiracy laws, Danny could face decades in prison for simply helping with ranch chores during his summer visits. Carlos explained the cartel's business model with chilling clarity. They used legitimate ranches across Texas to clean money through cattle sales. Real cattle, real buyers, real prices. But the money being cleaned was drug profits. Miguel's reputation as an honest rancher made him perfect cover. His military background meant he ran operations with precision and documentation that satisfied any inspector. The ultimatum was simple but devastating. Miguel had 90 days to pay $1.2 million in damages for discovering their operation and threatening their security. If he couldn't pay, they would frame him as the mastermind of a drug trafficking conspiracy, using his own ranch as evidence. Danny would be arrested as his accomplice. The Santos family would lose everything: their ranch, their freedom, and their future. Miguel spent the next month conducting systematic surveillance of the cartel's cattle-based money laundering operation across West Texas. His military intelligence training served him well as he mapped their network and identified vulnerabilities. The scope of their operation shocked him: 23 fake ranches across 3 counties, all using legitimate cattle businesses to clean money. Miguel documented how they used cattle sales to wash $50 million annually through the agricultural economy. The system was genius in its simplicity. Drug money came in as cash payments for cattle purchases. The cattle were real, the sales were real, and the buyers were legitimate businesses or exporters. But the cash being cleaned was drug profits that emerged as legitimate agricultural income. Miguel identified which ranchers were actually cartel money handlers disguised as legitimate businessmen. Some were real ranchers who had been compromised like him. Others were cartel operatives who had purchased ranches specifically for money laundering. The operation included feed stores, veterinary clinics, auction houses, and transport companies, an entire shadow economy within the legitimate cattle industry. The cartel stored cash in modified cattle trailers during transport between ranches. Miguel's 20-year reputation in the cattle business meant cartel members treated him as a trusted supplier, not a threat. His military experience helped him identify security weaknesses in their operation. He noticed patterns in their movements, recognized their command structure, and understood their logistics vulnerabilities. Every month, cartel ranches received mysterious veterinary supplies that required refrigerated transport. Miguel realized these shipments contained cash being moved between operations. The refrigerated trucks maintained climate control that protected money from humidity and temperature changes during long-distance transport. The veterinary supply cover story explained why the trucks needed special handling and why unauthorized people couldn't inspect the cargo. At a livestock auction in Midland, Miguel overheard cartel accountant Pablo discussing $2 million hidden in feed storage silos at the Esperanza Ranch. The conversation was conducted in Spanish, but Miguel's border upbringing made him fluent. Pablo was instructing another operative about collection schedules and security protocols for accessing the hidden money. Miguel didn't act immediately. Instead, he began developing a comprehensive plan based on his military training in logistics and intelligence gathering. He studied their security measures, documented their schedules, and identified the best access points for each location. His legitimate business gave him perfect cover for surveillance. Everyone expected cattle ranchers to visit other ranches, attend auctions, and inspect feed supplies. When Carlos became suspicious of Miguel's questions about shipping schedules and cattle movements, he issued a warning that made the stakes crystal clear. Curious ranchers end up as fertilizer, hermano. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. The threat was delivered with a smile, but Miguel understood the reality. The cartel had eliminated people for much less than discovering their money laundering operation. Miguel realized he had three choices: pay the $1.2 million he didn't have, flee and abandon his family's ranch, or fight back using the intelligence he was gathering. His military training had taught him that the best defense was often a devastating offense. If he could steal enough of their money, he might have leverage to negotiate his family's freedom and expose their operation to federal authorities. Esperanza Ranch looked like every other cattle operation in West Texas. Vast pastures dotted with mesquite trees, weathered barns built to withstand brutal summers, and towering grain silos that stored feed for thousands of cattle. Miguel arrived at exactly 6 a.m. with his weekly cattle feed delivery, 20 tons of premium grain worth $15,000. The delivery was completely legitimate, part of a contract he had held for 8 years. But Miguel had noticed something strange during previous deliveries over the past month. The feed silos registered 800 pounds heavier than they should when supposedly empty. His military training in logistics made him sensitive to weight discrepancies and unusual storage patterns. Empty grain silos had predictable weights based on their construction materials and capacity. These silos weighed too much. Miguel came prepared with specialized equipment disguised as legitimate ranching tools. He brought a portable grain moisture tester, standard equipment that any professional feed supplier would carry to ensure quality. Hidden inside the device were newspaper bundles cut to exact cash dimensions, wrapped in plastic to match the weight and feel of money bundles. His truck's hydraulic lift system had been secretly modified with a false compartment under the grain hopper that could hold 500 pounds of cargo invisible to casual inspection. His cattle health inspection badge, issued by the Texas Department of Agriculture, gave him legal authority to quality test any feed on any property in the state. The badge was completely legitimate. Miguel had earned it through his work supplying feed to multiple ranches. Agricultural inspectors had broad powers to prevent contamination that could destroy entire herds. Miguel began his routine inspection by climbing into the 30-foot-tall silo with his testing equipment. The interior was accessed through a maintenance ladder welded to the inside wall. The space was cramped and dusty, filled with the sweet smell of grain and the musty odor of concrete storage. Miguel moved carefully, using his LED headlamp to examine the storage containers. Inside silo number 3, Miguel found what appeared to be normal grain storage containers arranged in neat rows. But his military eye recognized something wrong with the pattern. The containers were positioned too precisely, with exact spacing that suggested deliberate placement rather than random storage. Real grain storage was functional, not decorative. Miguel discovered a false wall hidden behind a section that appeared to be normal concrete construction. The wall was actually a movable panel disguised with concrete paint and artificial aging. Behind the false wall, he found waterproof cases containing $400,000 in bundled hundreds. The money was vacuum-sealed in agricultural moisture bags labeled premium mineral supplements, a perfect disguise that would fool any casual inspector. The setup was brilliant criminal engineering. Anyone opening the cases would see legitimate agricultural products unless they physically handled every package. The moisture bags were real products used to protect cattle feed supplements from humidity. The cartel had simply repurposed legitimate agricultural packaging to hide money. Miguel worked with surgical precision, learned in military operations. He removed 40 bundles of cash, each containing exactly $10,000 in $100 bills. Each bundle was secured with bank bands and vacuum sealed to prevent deterioration. Miguel replaced them with identical newspaper bundles wrapped in the same moisture bags and secured with identical bands. Using grain dust collected from the silo floor, Miguel artificially aged the fake packages to match the appearance of money that had been stored for months. He used a small brush to apply dust patterns that matched the surrounding legitimate packages. The newspaper bundles were cut to exact dimensions and weighted with small metal washers to match the density of cash bundles. Miguel rebuilt the false wall using construction techniques learned during military-based construction projects. He mixed concrete dust with water to create mortar that matched the existing wall texture. The repair was invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. The entire theft process took exactly 47 minutes, time to match his normal grain quality testing procedures. Miguel loaded the stolen money into his truck's hidden compartment, a false bottom in the grain hopper that he had welded and painted to match the original equipment. From any external inspection, it appeared he was simply loading feed samples for laboratory testing, a normal part of his quality control process. Ranch foreman Jose arrived 30 minutes early for his shift and climbed up to check on Miguel's progress in the silo. Taking a long time with that grain, amigo. Find any problems up there? Miguel, covered in authentic grain dust and holding his legitimate moisture tester, calmly explained he was testing for aflatoxin contamination that could kill entire herds of cattle. Aflatoxin was every rancher's nightmare, a naturally occurring toxin that could contaminate grain supplies and cause liver damage or death in cattle. Testing required careful sampling from multiple locations within storage areas. Jose nodded and left immediately. No rancher wanted to interfere with contamination testing that could save their livestock. Before leaving, Miguel implemented a brilliant misdirection strategy. He deliberately created a small hole in the silo wall using a screwdriver, making it appear that rodents had damaged the storage area. He scattered some grain around the hole and left tiny teeth marks that suggested rats or mice had been trying to access stored feed. This false evidence served multiple purposes. It explained any minor disturbances in the storage area. It suggested the money theft was committed by desperate ranch hands who discovered the cash while investigating rodent damage. Most importantly, it directed suspicion away from professional theft and toward opportunistic crime by local workers. Rio Grande Ranch transformed into organized chaos during monthly cattle auction week. Hundreds of ranchers arrived with trailers full of cattle to sell, creating perfect cover for money movement operations. Miguel's continued surveillance had revealed that the cartel moved their largest cash reserves using modified livestock trailers during these busy periods when security attention was focused on crowd control rather than vehicle inspection. Miguel spent 3 weeks studying the cartel's mobile money storage system during legitimate cattle transactions. The trailers appeared identical to standard livestock haulers from external inspection, but they had been converted into mobile banks with sophisticated hidden compartments. The modifications were professional-grade work that required specialized welding and hydraulic expertise. The floor panels of cartel trailers contained false bottoms accessed through hidden hydraulic systems controlled from the driver's cab. Money was stored in military-grade waterproof cases that slid into floor compartments through precisely engineered tracks. Each trailer could carry between $800,000 and $1.2 million during auction week, when large amounts of cash naturally moved through the cattle economy. The hydraulic controls were ingeniously disguised as standard trailer brake systems. The additional controls looked like routine maintenance equipment that any professional driver would recognize. Only someone familiar with the specific modification would know that certain switches controlled money storage rather than vehicle braking. Miguel prepared for this heist by modifying his own cattle trailer with an identical hidden compartment system. Working in his barn over several weekends, he welded false floor panels and installed hydraulic controls copied from his observations of cartel trailers. His military engineering background made him capable of replicating their modification with precision. Miguel arrived at Rio Grande Ranch driving his cattle trailer loaded with 40 head of prize Angus cattle, a completely legitimate $200,000 delivery to a buyer he had worked with for 12 years. The cattle were real, the sale was real, and the buyer was a legitimate beef processor who knew nothing about cartel operations. During the organized chaos of cattle auction loading, Miguel orchestrated an incredible deception that required perfect timing and nerves of steel. He parked his trailer in the designated loading area directly next to the cartel's money-hauling trailer. Both trailers looked absolutely identical from external inspection. Same manufacturer, same model year, same paint scheme. The cartel used a 30-minute cattle health inspection delay as cover for loading money into their trailer's hidden compartments. During this same 30-minute window, Miguel executed his swap operation with military precision. He accessed both trailers' hydraulic systems using tools hidden in his legitimate cattle handling equipment. Miguel moved $1.2 million from the cartel trailer to his trailer using their own hydraulic loading system. The money was stored in waterproof cases designed for this exact type of transport. Each case contained $100,000 in bundled hundreds, vacuum-sealed to prevent moisture damage and equipped with RFID tracking chips for inventory control. Miguel replaced their money with concrete blocks wrapped in cash-colored paper that he had prepared weeks in advance. The blocks were precisely weighted to match money cases and wrapped in realistic-looking currency paper printed with generic dollar bill patterns. The deception would fool casual visual inspection and maintain proper weight distribution in the trailer. Miguel's Army engineering training allowed him to operate the complex hydraulic systems without triggering safety alarms or error codes. He used a portable cattle scale, legitimate equipment for any livestock operation, to ensure his trailer maintained exactly the same weight distribution after the swap. Weight imbalances could cause handling problems that would attract attention. Security cameras throughout the auction facility recorded only normal cattle loading procedures. Miguel's actions appeared identical to legitimate ranchers preparing livestock for transport. His movements were smooth and professional, consistent with 20 years of experience in cattle handling operations. The concrete blocks were wrapped in real $100 bills on the outside layers to fool quick visual inspections. Miguel had spent $2,000 of his own money purchasing genuine currency to create convincing outer layers. The fake money would pass any inspection that didn't involve physically handling individual bundles. When auction officials conducted their routine cattle health inspection, Miguel performed flawlessly as a legitimate rancher. He discussed cattle bloodlines and breeding programs with expertise developed over 2 decades. He showed genuine concern about cattle stress during transport and even offered advice to younger ranchers about proper animal handling techniques. Cartel accountant Ramon decided to conduct a surprise audit of the money trailer before it left the auction facility. Miguel watched in terror from 50 feet away as Ramon opened the hydraulic compartment to count cash reserves. The concrete blocks wrapped in authentic currency passed Ramon's visual inspection perfectly. He didn't physically lift the packages. They looked completely authentic from above and maintained proper stacking patterns. Miguel drove away from the auction with $1.2 million hidden in his trailer's hydraulic compartments, following his planned route to deliver cattle to a legitimate buyer 50 miles away. The buyer, a beef processing plant manager Miguel had worked with for years, even helped him unload the cattle using the facility's hydraulic chutes. The buyer never suspected he was handling a trailer containing over $1 million in stolen cartel money. Miguel's final misdirection involved planting evidence suggesting the theft was an inside job orchestrated by a rival cartel faction. He left a distinctive cigarette brand, Marlboro Reds with Mexican tax stamps, near the area where the hydraulic panel had been accessed. This brand was specifically associated with a competing criminal organization that had territorial disputes with the Sinaloa cartel. Paloma Ranch concealed the cartel's most sophisticated money storage facility, an underground bunker 40 feet beneath the cattle barn containing $5.2 million. The bunker was accessible only through grain storage ventilation shafts converted into security systems. The access shaft was deliberately designed at 24 inches wide to prevent human access. The vault used RFID cattle ear tags as electronic keys, brilliant criminal innovation since ear tags were normal ranch equipment. Miguel spent 2 weeks creating cover by filing false reports about bovine respiratory disease outbreaks requiring air quality testing. Miguel's preparation was physically demanding. He lost 30 pounds over 6 weeks to fit through the narrow shaft and created custom tools including miniature cutting equipment, flexible lighting, and emergency oxygen supplies. At 10:30 p.m., Miguel arrived wearing authentic veterinary emergency gear borrowed from a friend. He established quarantine protocols, moved cattle to distant pastures, and spent 45 minutes conducting legitimate air quality tests to establish his professional presence. At 11:30 p.m., Miguel entered the ventilation shaft using professional climbing gear hidden in testing equipment. The descent required advanced rappelling techniques in a shaft so narrow he had to exhale to squeeze through sections. The underground vault contained military-grade waterproof cases stacked floor to ceiling, each containing $100,000. Miguel accessed the vault using cloned RFID cattle tags programmed with equipment from his own ranch. Over 3 grueling hours, he made 12 trips up and down the 40-foot shaft, removing $5.2 million. He used a pulley system disguised as air sampling equipment to haul money up the shaft. At 2:40 a.m., Miguel faced his most dangerous moment when cartel boss Eduardo Ruiz arrived unexpectedly with accountants for an emergency audit. Miguel was trapped in the vault while armed men conducted business above. His emergency oxygen supply lasted 90 minutes, but the audit continued for 2 hours. Miguel hung motionless in the ventilation shaft, facing suffocation, while Eduardo discussed financial matters. Miguel saved himself by triggering the barn's fire suppression system from underground, forcing evacuation. He escaped and flooded the bunker using irrigation systems, making the theft appear like mechanical failures caused the damage. Desert Wind Ranch hosted the annual West Texas Rodeo Championship, a three-day event that attracted thousands of spectators and provided perfect cover for the cartel's largest money movement operation of the year. Miguel's surveillance had revealed that $8.5 million flowed through Desert Wind Ranch during rodeo week, disguised as prize money, vendor payments, and equipment purchases. The rodeo provided ideal conditions for money laundering because large cash transactions were normal and expected. Prize money for rodeo champions, vendor payments for food and equipment, and spectator spending created a legitimate cash economy that could absorb millions in drug money without attracting attention. The cartel had transformed a traditional Texas celebration into a sophisticated money-cleaning operation. Money was stored in the rodeo announcer's booth, an elevated platform that provided 360-degree views of the arena and surrounding facilities. The booth was positioned for optimal visibility during events, but this same elevation made it a perfect observation post for monitoring security and coordinating money movements. Cartel accountants posed as rodeo officials responsible for managing prize money and vendor payments. Cash was transported throughout the facility in trophy cases and equipment boxes that appeared to contain legitimate rodeo supplies. Security personnel focused on crowd control and spectator safety rather than inspecting equipment used by apparent rodeo officials. The cartel's operatives carried official-looking credentials and behaved like professional event managers. Miguel entered the rodeo as a legitimate competitor, leveraging skills he had developed since childhood on working ranches throughout Texas. He had been riding bulls since age 14 and easily qualified for the competition by placing in preliminary events. His entry as a genuine competitor provided unrestricted access to backstage areas, competitor facilities, and technical equipment normally off-limits to spectators. Miguel modified his rodeo gear bag with hidden compartments designed to transport cash without detection. He studied the timing of rodeo events to identify periods of maximum crowd distraction when attention would be focused on arena activities rather than equipment movement. He planted sophisticated listening devices in the announcer's booth during equipment setup, allowing him to monitor cartel communications and timing. Miguel's theft strategy involved 3 coordinated phases timed to coincide with the most exciting and distracting moments of rodeo competition. Each phase targeted different money storage locations while using crowd noise and excitement to mask any suspicious activities. Phase 1 occurred on Friday night during the bull riding finals, the rodeo's most popular and exciting event. Miguel participated in the competition legitimately, placing 3rd overall with a score that impressed veteran competitors and spectators. His authentic performance established his credibility as a genuine rodeo participant rather than an infiltrator. During the victory ceremony, while crowds cheered and television cameras focused on winners, Miguel accessed the announcer's booth claiming he needed to check audio levels for his victory speech. This request was completely reasonable since third-place finishers traditionally addressed the crowd. Miguel used this legitimate access to steal $2.8 million hidden in professional audio equipment cases. Miguel replaced the stolen money with concrete blocks wrapped in cash-colored paper and waited to match the original cases. The audio equipment continued functioning normally since the money had been stored in separate compartments within the cases. Miguel's substitution was invisible unless someone physically opened the money storage compartments. Phase 2 took place on Saturday afternoon during women's barrel racing, an event that generated intense crowd excitement and media attention. Miguel volunteered as a technical assistant helping with electronic timing equipment, a natural role for someone with military electronics training. His volunteer status provided legitimate access to restricted areas and technical equipment. Miguel used his timing equipment access to steal $3.1 million from trophy cases, while spectators focused on the exciting barrel racing competition. He replaced the money with rodeo promotional materials, including programs, posters, and merchandise that were weighted with metal washers to feel identical to cash bundles. The substitution maintained proper weight and appearance for any casual inspection. Phase 3 represented Miguel's most audacious theft during Sunday's championship ceremony, when fireworks displays and closing celebrations created maximum noise and visual distraction. Miguel made his final theft of $2.6 million from the main prize money vault, disguised as a professional sound equipment cabinet positioned near the announcer's booth. Miguel had to maintain his legitimate competitor status while conducting sophisticated theft operations. He performed in actual rodeo events while secretly planning and executing money thefts. He carried stolen money through crowds of thousands of spectators using rodeo equipment as camouflage. The psychological pressure of maintaining perfect performance in both legitimate competition and criminal activity tested his military training and personal determination. Miguel even competed injured after suffering a legitimate bull riding accident that left him with bruised ribs and a minor concussion. His decision to continue competing despite injury actually enhanced his credibility, since dedication to competition, despite pain, was considered normal and admirable behavior among rodeo participants. Miguel delivered an emotional victory speech about traditional Texas values and honest ranching while standing directly above $8.5 million in stolen cartel money hidden in his equipment. His speech about family legacy and agricultural traditions drew a standing ovation from spectators who had no idea they were applauding a man who had just executed one of the largest thefts in cartel history. Cartel accountant Pablo conducted a surprise inspection of the announcer's booth during Miguel's second-phase theft. Miguel avoided detection by hiding inside a large speaker cabinet while Pablo counted what he believed was legitimate money. The concrete blocks and weighted promotional materials passed visual inspection because Pablo didn't physically handle individual packages. Miguel's rodeo competitor friend Jake offered to help carry Miguel's heavy equipment after his victory, a gesture of friendship and congratulation that could have exposed the theft. Miguel had to decline the offer without seeming suspicious or ungrateful, claiming that his equipment contained sensitive electronics that required careful handling by trained personnel. Security guard Williams noticed Miguel accessing technical areas frequently throughout the three-day event. However, Miguel's legitimate competitor status and volunteer technical assistant role provided perfect explanations for his presence in restricted areas. Williams even complimented Miguel on his dedication to helping with rodeo operations in addition to competing. Miguel realized that rodeos represented the cartel's entire statewide distribution system across Texas. He planted GPS tracking devices and equipment that traveled to other rodeo venues, creating a comprehensive map of their money laundering network. This intelligence would prove valuable for his eventual cooperation with federal authorities. Miguel executed his most ambitious operation during Livestock Show Week, a period when agricultural activity across West Texas reached peak intensity. His plan involved hitting 8 cartel ranches in coordinated daylight operations, using the chaos of livestock judging, equipment demonstrations, and agricultural inspections as cover for the largest theft in his campaign. The livestock show created perfect conditions for Miguel's operations because agricultural officials, ranchers, and inspectors moved freely between properties throughout the region. Miguel's legitimate credentials as a cattle supplier and feed inspector gave him unrestricted access to any ranch participating in livestock show activities. His presence at multiple locations appeared normal and professional rather than suspicious. At 10 a.m., Miguel arrived at Esperanza Ranch, posing as an emergency livestock health inspector responding to reports of respiratory disease in cattle. The cover story was completely believable because livestock shows naturally increased disease transmission risks by concentrating animals from multiple ranches in close proximity. Miguel extracted $1.8 million from modified grain silos while ranch staff attended cattle judging competitions. At 11:30 a.m., Miguel used his prepared disease outbreak cover story at Rio Grande Ranch to establish quarantine procedures that cleared staff from money storage areas. He claimed to be collecting air and water samples to determine the extent of potential contamination. This authority allowed him to access cattle trailer compartments and steal $2.4 million while appearing to conduct legitimate health assessments. At 1:15 p.m., Miguel infiltrated Paloma Ranch during the staff lunch break, when security was minimal and most personnel were attending livestock demonstrations. He accessed the central vault hidden in the barn foundation, removing $8.2 million using techniques perfected during his previous underground infiltration. His timing coincided with a livestock handling demonstration that drew crowds away from the main barn area. At 2:45 p.m., Miguel executed a lightning-fast strike at Desert Wind Ranch during shift change when day staff departed and evening personnel had not yet arrived. He exploited the 15-minute security gap to access refrigerated storage units containing $1.9 million hidden among legitimate veterinary supplies. His military training and rapid assault operations enabled him to complete the theft before security coverage resumed. At 4:20 p.m., Miguel hit his final target at Cinco Hermanos Ranch, where he stole $3.7 million from underground bunkers disguised as cattle feed storage facilities. The timing coincided with evening cattle feeding operations that required all ranch hands to be in distant pastures. Miguel used his feed supplier credentials to access storage areas that contained the cartel's reserve funds for upcoming operations. Each theft was executed with flawless precision based on weeks of surveillance and planning. Miguel used false emergency alerts to keep staff away from money storage areas during his operations. His cattle health inspection authority provided legal justification for his presence at every location. Modified trucks transported stolen cash hidden in legitimate livestock feed compartments that would pass any routine inspection. RFID tracking systems confirmed successful cash removal from each location, but Miguel had disabled the tracking devices using electromagnetic pulse equipment borrowed from military surplus dealers. The disabled trackers would appear to be technical malfunctions rather than deliberate sabotage, buying him additional time before the thefts were discovered. At Paloma Ranch, Miguel faced his closest call when Eduardo Ruiz returned unexpectedly with accountants to verify money for a major drug transaction scheduled for the following day. Miguel was inside the underground vault when he heard vehicles arriving above. He had to remain hidden in the vault's ventilation system for 90 minutes while they counted cash in other sections of the facility. Miguel's oxygen supply ran dangerously low during the extended hiding period. He controlled his breathing using meditation techniques learned during military survival training, but the psychological stress of potential discovery while facing suffocation pushed him beyond his normal limits. He could hear Eduardo's voice clearly through the ventilation system as the cartel boss discussed financial arrangements that would have resulted in Miguel's immediate execution if discovered. The discovery of $18 million missing across 8 locations sent shockwaves through the Sinaloa cartel's Texas operations. Eduardo Ruiz called an emergency meeting to address the most sophisticated theft in cartel history. The coordination suggested involvement by a rival organization with inside knowledge. Immediate chaos erupted as leadership suspected betrayal by their own members. Eduardo ordered violent purges of suspected traitors, resulting in 12 cartel operatives disappearing. Miguel continued normal ranch operations, appearing completely innocent. He attended livestock auctions and maintained his regular agricultural business schedule. Eduardo hired Ramon Silva, an ex-military tracker from Mexican Special Forces, to investigate the thefts. Silva's military background made him dangerous because he understood the tactical thinking behind coordinated operations. He quickly realized the thefts required intimate knowledge of ranch operations and legitimate access credentials. Miguel's false emergency reports convinced agricultural authorities there had been a genuine livestock disease outbreak. His stellar reputation provided perfect cover for his presence at all theft locations. Carlos began questioning Miguel's convenient alibis and detailed knowledge of cartel operations. Miguel secretly relocated Danny and his mother to a safe house in Austin, using military contacts to establish new identities. The coordinated thefts attracted DEA agent Maria Contreras, who recognized the pattern suggested military training. Eduardo offered a $3 million reward for the thieves. Miguel faced threats from cartel enforcers and federal investigators, while his theft triggered a gang war between rival cartels. Miguel eliminated evidence using controlled burns disguised as brush clearing. He laundered stolen money through legitimate cattle sales to overseas buyers and planted evidence suggesting rival cartels coordinated the thefts. Silva interviewed Miguel in his barn, directly above $5 million in hidden stolen money. Miguel's counter-interrogation training helped him maintain composure. Under pressure, Carlos revealed his suspicions about Miguel's timing and knowledge. Silva's investigation focused on Miguel as the prime suspect. After discovering his military background and logistics training, Silva's investigation became a focused manhunt. Eduardo imported additional security personnel and increased the reward to $5 million. Agent Contreras discovered Miguel had conducted emergency inspections at every theft location during exact time frames. Miguel faced immediate danger from multiple directions: cartel enforcers, federal investigators, and rival cartels. His theft had triggered violent gang wars across West Texas. Miguel used electromagnetic pulse generators to destroy evidence and establish shell companies to launder money internationally. Silva reached a breakthrough when military records showed Miguel had expertise for coordinated thefts. Technical analysis revealed military-trained perpetrators. Carlos provided detailed information about Miguel's suspicious behavior. Silva confronted Miguel during a surprise ranch visit, questioning him above concealed stolen money. Miguel realized his situation was impossible to sustain as investigations converged from multiple directions. Miguel contacted Agent Contreras with a proposition: complete evidence of cartel operations in exchange for immunity and family protection. His surveillance had produced comprehensive intelligence on the cartel's Texas network, including 47 fake ranches and corrupt officials. Agent Contreras recommended full immunity for Miguel's cooperation. Federal raids across 3 states destroyed the entire network within 48 hours. 89 arrests included Eduardo Ruiz and Silva. Asset seizures totaled $300 million. Carlos was captured fleeing to Mexico with $2 million. Miguel received complete immunity. With cartel claims nullified, he regained ownership of Santos Ranch. Danny and his mother returned safely under witness protection. Miguel transformed the ranch into organic beef production and established an agricultural scholarship fund. Local newspapers called Miguel the rancher who took down the cartel. His story became a law enforcement case study. Years later, anonymous tips continued exposing cartel operations. Investigators suspected the cowboy was still operating as an intelligence source protecting legitimate ranchers. Miguel, now 47, watched Danny graduate from Texas A&M with honors in agricultural business management. The Santos Ranch sign read, "Established 1952, rebuilt 2023, where family and honor matter most." Prize Angus cattle grazed on pastures finally free from criminal control. Miguel's story demonstrated that individual courage could challenge sophisticated criminal organizations. His consulting work helped develop industry standards for preventing criminal infiltration of agricultural systems. Federal authorities credited his intelligence with eliminating cartel money laundering worth hundreds of millions. The strongest bull had made the herd turn against itself, proving individual determination could overcome criminal organizations. Miguel's victory represented the triumph of legitimate agricultural values over criminal corruption in rural American communities.